Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 14th Ordinary Meeting of the Literary and Scientific Society of the University of Belfast. I forgot to bring any water with me, so bear with me. So we're gathered here tonight to debate the motion that this House supports Post Brexit United Ireland. Before we get to that, we have quite a lot of ordinary membership business to get to. Start off as we do every week with just some brief announcements. So, the pub crawl will be doing next Monday at 7 o'clock. That start kicks off in the Sunflower Bar. Really come along. It's our first annual pub crawl to celebrate our birthday. It'll be our 169th birthday, I believe, at that point. So, by all means, talk to our tech officer, Chris Spratt, if you'd like to come along with that. Just like to say, we have a delegation, I think possibly our largest delegation, heading along to the Irish National Law debates in Galway this evening. So the competition starts tomorrow, but it's sort of a Tolkien-esque trek just to get to Galway. So I'd just like to send out my words of support to them. Our next debate, just to say, is this House welcomes the collapse of Stormont. Actually, yeah, because we like to be quite light-hearted and friendly and all that in the society. If you're interested in signing up for that, just approach any of the council members sitting around this evening. Council members, if you want to raise your hands, so people know who you are. Thank you. And yes, if to the people who aren't part of the society as yet, hopefully what you see this evening will enthrall you and encourage you to come along again. So if you'd like to sign up, maybe at the end, come along next week, talk to Rob or myself. And finally, just to say, because it's quite important, we'll be having an extraordinary general meeting of the Society next Thursday to, one, pass some constitutional amendments about getting some new rules added to the Society, and to elect an interim treasurer for the next couple of months. And the only other thing is to say, if you're listening at home over the live link, you can follow us at QUB or you can use the hashtag UIDebate@QUB. And the only thing left for me to say is to read out the minutes of last week. Mr. Rob Whitehurst. The motion last week was, this House would allow women monthly menstruation. So, welcome to the floor, Mr. Rob Whitehurst.
Good evening, everyone. The 13th Ordinary Meeting of the 168th Session of the Literary and Scientific Society took place on the 2nd of February 2017 and was attended by 14 members. Private members' business was heard from Mr. Matthew Sullivan, who asked the House to comment on attempts to ensure US President Donald Trump shouldn't be allowed to enter the UK on an official state visit. Mr. Robert Whitehurst raised concerns that the Donald, being in the presence of Her Maj, would likely cause national embarrassment, while Mr. Jonathan Finlay asked the House to consider whether they would have any confidence in either Donald Trump or Theresa May. Mr. Conor Arnold took a reluctant stab at defending President Trump, saying that in a post-Brexit world, we need to bite the bullet and ensure a basic level of diplomacy with the United States. Craig Miller concluded the debate by praising Theresa May, saying that she was playing a brilliant game. Unfortunately, that game appears to be buckaroo. Let's hope leaving the EU isn't a trivial pursuit. There's about 7 more minutes of this, we'll keep going. John McLean then asked if Labour leaders Jeremy Corbyn's comment that people choose to be gay was harmful to the LGBT movement. Robert Clark responded by saying that even if it were a choice, then that's A-OK by him. Rachel Allen said it was a grey area, and Ciara Campbell concluded that we shouldn't read too much into Mr. Corbyn's comments. President's questions were heard from Ciara Campbell, who asked Mr. Murphy what his favourite song of 2017 was, the reply being anything by London-based electric soul artist Sampha. Rachel Ireland then asked the President where he got his bow tie from, the reply being, please stop asking about my bow tie. Finally, Mr. Matthew Sullivan asked the President what he enjoyed for breakfast that particular day. Mr. Murphy's answer of a cheesy curry chip at 4 p.m. was nothing if not predictable. President Murphy then announced the motion for the evening. This House would allow working women monthly menstruation leave. Opening for the proposition was Ms. Rachel Ireland. She said that forcing women to work in 9-to-5 schedules when their ability is hampered by their periods simply isn't reasonable. She wished to introduce a flexi-time system whereby women who would otherwise be a liability due to their menstruation are not made to work during this time. Indeed, she claimed that this wasn't a perfect situation, but neither is forcing women to pay for products in order to work and contribute less than they would normally. She concluded by saying that women being allowed to work from home during this time would allow them to work comfortably and with higher productivity. Opening the debate for the opposition was Mr. Hugh Dobbin, who went straight to the bat by asserting that the proposition was anti-feminist. He claimed that similar flexi-time systems had been implemented in Japan, where it is supposedly believed that women are inherently weaker than men and must be given time to rest, lest they risk being overworked. Mr. Dobbin derided this as wholly condescending and not something which should be implemented in the United Kingdom. He also claimed that this would inevitably raise issues of discrimination against men in the workplace, as women may be perceived as receiving additional holiday time. Finally, he concluded that we must have systems in place to accommodate menstruation which are fair and would not end up alienating female workers. Concluding for the proposition was Mr. Jonathan Finlay. He claimed that the opposition was in some way assuming that women would attempt to cheat the menstruation leave were it to be introduced. He claimed that this wouldn't be just another sick leave and that any system would have to be scrounger-proof. He claimed that the menstrual cycle is poorly serviced in today's society and that we need to move towards a cultural shift whereby attitudes would be changed. Concluding for the opposition, and so the debate, was Mr. Con O'Neill. He claimed that this wasn't a motion that only affected the female population, claiming that women being absent from work from their departments would pressure companies and workplaces to compensate for their absence. Furthermore, women being on menstruation leave would likely lead to men being promoted over higher qualified female workers. He also raised the issue of women who would choose not to take menstruation leave, and how this would likely result in a schism between women who do and those who don't partake of the leave. He concluded by saying that Wikipedia showed him that periods were quite sore, but he believes women are tough and durable. Questions were heard from John McLean, Rachel Ireland, Craig Miller, Robert Clark, Lily Vetter, Calvin Black, and Craig Miller. A vote based on prior House opinion was taken before the debate, which read 3 ayes, 17 nays, and 13 abstentions. Meanwhile, a casting vote based on Speaker's performance on the motion, this House would allow women that monthly menstruation leave was taken, which read 7 ayes, 13 nays, and 10 abstentions. May I take the minutes as read? Aye. Thank you.
And just before we get on to a brief round of private members' business, I just have 2 honorary life membership cards to give out to esteemed members who are here who haven't been here for quite a while. So to hand out, these are handed out to members who have, over a long period of time, demonstrated their dedication and their usefulness in society. So first I'd like to welcome up and congratulate with his honorary life membership card, Dr. Stephen Goss. And I now welcome up Mr. Finbar Rawlings of the Right, and we now move on to private members' business. This is part of the opening notes. If anyone has any sort of issues that they've seen in the news this week they'd like to sort of raise before the House, maybe start a brief mini debate. I can't think of anything that's happened this week whatsoever. So if anyone has anything they'd like to raise, yourself, Mr. McAleenan.
So there's a recent referendum in the Queen's Student Union. I wondered when the second referendum was going to be.
Does anyone else have an opinion on the second referendum? The thrilling sequel to the first one that may or may not be happening. Mr. Whitehurst?
So the record turnout of all time for any SU referendum was 13%, and this was hailed as a huge success. Is this perhaps overclaiming success?
Yeah, thrilling levels of legitimacy. Yes, absolutely. Does anyone want to comment on that? Yes, Mr. Bunting?
That is actually 3,000 students who are engaging in democratic exercise. So I know it doesn't sound like loads, 13.5% sounds like it probably took no effort at all, but it actually did take quite a lot of effort. And I think it's great, and it's something to be hailed, and it will make a stronger students' union.
Here. And we'll take one more motion of piece of private members' business before we move on to President's questions. Yourself, Dr. Miller.
To use that line of sort of logic, you're basically saying 3,000 or 3,600,000 people is a lot of people, and that's enough to decide a government on. So it's a pretty flawed line of logic to go down the raw number of people is a good number to judge outcome by.
I see Mr. Rogers wants to make a response there.
Ross, didn't we ban Queen's public referendum a couple of motions ago, a couple of years ago? How is somebody going to move that kind of thing?
Well, I mean, CSU, they do their own thing. We rail against them. Any other pieces of private members' business? Any motions they'd like to pass? No? Moving swiftly onwards to President's questions then. Does anyone have any really important questions they'd like to ask me? Any pressing issues they'd like to know about? Anything at all? Fantastic, we'll move on from that then. And that just leads me to introduce the motion for tonight. This House believes in a Post Brexit United Ireland. The reason we wanted to have this motion is I think that we could have a United Ireland motion debates until the counties come home in Northern Ireland, but I think that because of the constitutional ramifications that this has for Northern Ireland, quite ably argued by Queen's University known Professor Gordon Anthony before the Supreme Court, I thought it was quite important to have this motion to discuss the ramifications it has for the constitution in Northern Ireland, the Good Friday Agreement, the crisis it might have for people of a unionist persuasion who sort of believe in the European Union as a political project as well. So just before we get on to that, we're going to have some opening statements from the very qualified neutral chair for this evening, Dr. Stephen Farry, Alliance MLA from North Down, and evidently has a lot of experience for sitting in the middle and from each other. So yes, I'd just like to give away the floor to Dr. Stephen Farry.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President, and good evening, everyone. Thanks very much for your invitation along here to be your guest chair, neutral guest chair. Just one small correction to my introduction. I'm currently not an MLA because, as your next motion has accurately predicted, Stormont has collapsed. We're having elections, so we're currently barred from using the term MLA while the election proceeds before us. I have a long and illustrious in parts relationship with Queen's, having been a student here for a grand total of 11 years, which included doing a PhD over a rather long wandering pathway, but we got there in the end. Those are the days when academia were slightly more tolerant of other extracurricular activities. Since then I returned as the Minister for Employment and Learning for 5 years and responsibility for higher education policy and funding, and also tuition fees or lack of tuition fees, depending on your point of view in that particular regard. And more recently, in the past few weeks, I've actually been appointed as a visiting professor in the George Bishop Centre, so I'm sort of half a member of staff here as well, so keeping an eye on all of you as well in terms of the comments that you're saying for future reference. This is also the first of two Brexit debates I'm having this evening. After this debate, I'm heading down to the BBC studios to discuss Brexit, and a very similar debate to what you're about to have itself with Red Jempe on The View. So if you're not in the pub or if you watch it live there tomorrow, you can catch up on all of that as well. But obviously your debate tonight is a very timely one with the legislation working its way through Westminster on the triggering of Article 50, and Article 50 itself being said to be triggered within the next number of weeks. And also timely in the sense that while we don't currently have a functioning assembly or an executive, there is a major challenge ahead in terms of what is going to be the formal position of any, and I stress the word any, local administration that may or may not be formed in the weeks that follow the election. Of course, Northern Ireland itself is one of those regions that may be most acutely affected by Brexit, whether it's economically, financially, and in terms of its politics and its constitution. And if we look at that in particular, there are some issues regarding the future of the Good Friday Agreement and how it can be consistent with that. And issues as well about the implications for a border, and indeed if we are to see a hard border emerge, whether that will be down the Irish Sea or across the island of Ireland, or a little bit of both. And no doubt that will be something that we touch upon in considerable detail in the forthcoming debate. But it is important that we do discuss these issues, and that right across the community in Northern Ireland that there is a real sense of understanding of what Brexit does mean for Northern Ireland, and in particular whenever the politicians haven't yet come to a settled consensual view as to what they want to see happening in terms of Brexit as it relates to Northern Ireland. The more that people themselves are having their own say across civil society, the better we are going to be in terms of that informed debate. So in that regard, I wish you well for tonight's proceedings, and hopefully it is a spirited but fair and balanced debate, and that you have a good reasoned outcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. And just before we get into the substantive debate, I just thought I'd sort of run over the rules of the debating format, just for all those who are here and might be unfamiliar for it. All speakers on either side have 7 minutes to speak. The first minute of their speeches are what's considered protected time, so no one from the opposition or proposition can raise a point of information or ask them a question. The middle 5 minutes of your speech are totally open. You can take points from the floor or not. I'm not sure upstairs. You can take points from the opposing side or not, and then your last minute where you're summing up will be protected as well, so try not to talk over the other side at that point. Your speech will not be considered to be given unless you address it from the chair. I should probably emphasise that because it's quite a fractious debate. Please respect the other side at all times. Try not to speak over them. Try not to yell at them. Try not to do any back and forth as much as you may want to. And with that, we'll get started. So I welcome for the first speaker for the proposition opening for this evening, Mr. Richie Gallagher.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. I see you doing with the steps. This is a bit awkward. Hello to everyone here as well. Thanks very much for attending tonight. It's great to see such a large turnout, and great to see so many people interested in the debate. We certainly get used to doing the debates in this great hall, so that's great. Firstly, a point on the motion, just to clear things up. We are proposing the support of a Post Brexit United Ireland as attained by the will of the people. Just in case anyone was confused about that. It's not anything else. So, first thing I'm going to make everyone aware of is a report that came out last year called Modelling Irish Unification. Seen as the first major examination of the potential economic effects of an all-island economy, undertaken by Canadian consultancy KLC and University of British Columbia academics, who are noted for similarly having successfully predicted economic improvement after German unification and carried out similar reports on Korean unification, suggests significant long-term improvement in the economies of both the North and the Republic resulting from unification. Report contributor Dr. Marcus Noland noted Northern Ireland is falling ever further behind the Republic in terms of economic development, and said future relations between North and South potentially could become more problematic due to the UK's withdrawal from the EU. The North would particularly benefit from unification, with its exports initially rising by 5% and long-term GDP per capita increasing by 4% to 7.5% after adopting the euro. So that's after adopting the euro. And the Irish tax system, while the Republic would benefit from barrier-free access to the northern market. In total, the report, led by respected economists Dr. Kurt Hubner and Dr. Renger van Nooyhoek, suggests that in a United Ireland, GDP in the Republic could rise by €30 million to €152 million in the year of policy implementation. In total, Irish unification could boost all Ireland GDP in the first 8 years by as much as €35.6 billion. These figures aren't really a surprise. In fact, people have been predicting economic growth after unification for years. Think about it. Think about the duplication of services that after. Yes, sir. I think the duplication of services, for one thing. Why fund 2 healthcare systems, 2 education systems, 2 transport systems? I mean, Northern Ireland is roughly the same population as London. You wouldn't imagine 2 healthcare systems in London, 2 education services, 2 transport services. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, the mere fact that we have a dual system has insulated the North from much of the economic problems that plagued the South during the fall of the Celtic Tiger. Right now, the austerity plan imposed on Ireland has not seen much effect up north. In fact, our bloc grant has increased. However, it's due to the lack of political will to make real reforms in the north that this duplication of services has caused real damage, as well as an unwillingness to compromise on political ideals.
Yeah, you could also argue that it insulated Northern Ireland from the success of the Celtic Tiger as well, and the predicted success economically in the future. But that's not the only reason why they're anticipating such growth. Northern Ireland is constantly trying to compete with the Republic in terms of low corporation tax that it simply can't compete with. So my question would be why compete? Post Brexit, the North would also see greater openness to foreign direct investment and diminished trade barriers between it and other Eurozone members. In fact, the predictions for a post Brexit Northern Ireland are the complete opposite of this. A post Brexit Northern Ireland continuing in its current state is expected to cause, at best, economic decline in Northern Ireland, impacting on the Republic as well, and at worst, a return to ethno-nationalist conflict, which has dominated the region for its majority of its.
Mr. Chairperson?
Sorry, I have to really get on. Sorry. In fact, some might say we are already on the road to that ethno-nationalist conflict. As Conservative MPs just last night voted down Amendment 86 to the UK government's EU, or the notification of withdrawal bill, aka the amendment that would have required that the UK government, invoking Article 50, and during subsequent negotiations, does not break the agreements of the Good Friday Agreement. This shows a complete lack of regard for the Northern Ireland peace process by the current Conservative government. Then again, you could count on one hand the amount of times that British government actually cared about Northern Ireland.
On that point?
Look, Northern Ireland was only ever intended to be a temporary solution to a problem. Northern Ireland is a state that has never made a profit. It is a state that has caused the deaths of thousands of people and has given rise to a political culture of exploiting the unique political situation here for one's own ends, as we've seen a lot of recently. Furthermore, it is a state that hasn't voted the same way as Westminster on a single issue that I can recall recently, namely foreign policy, trident, austerity, being dragged out of the EU against its will wishes. It is a state governed by a political party that around 16 people here in Northern Ireland actually vote for, 4 of whom happen to be sitting across the table right now. So can I please be excused for thinking that the continuation of a state in its current form is motivated much more by tribalism than pragmatism. There is a solution to Northern Ireland's post-Brexit problems, and it's been staring us in the face from the very beginning. Sorry, I have to how long's that?
Got a minute.
A minute 10, okay. Ireland will become the only native English-speaking country in the EU. There is advantages to be had now. An example of this is Barclays already moving their European offices to Dublin, with many more companies expected to follow suit. Instead of seeing Northern Ireland as torn apart by a hard border and economic devastation, let's make the most of this current situation that we're in. Let's make a United Ireland attractive in a post-Brexit world, and do Westminster a favour whilst we're at it, as suddenly that EU frontier border issue will go away. Not that I think the Westminster ever wanted Northern Ireland in the first place. But you in Northern Ireland have a way out that the English Remainers do not. A loophole from this Brexit madness resulting from a fallout in the Tory camp. Let's use it. Thank you.
And to open the case for the opposition, Mr. Peter Bennett.
Mr. Chairperson, Mr. President, members of the proposition and members of the House, I must first apologise to the orange men and women in the audience tonight. For my part, despite my immense respect and support for her, this is not going to be a debate about how great the Queen is, nor is it going to be about how great the UK is. I'm not even going to make any jokes about how British tea, queuing, or talking about the weather is. I realise none of that would convince any of the die-hard Republicans, or even any of you who are on the fence tonight. Instead, what I intend to do is to convince you all that once you set aside any narrow-minded nationalism from either side, Northern Ireland is simply better off as part of the UK, economically, societally, and politically. How hard can that be? The motion does, of course, mention Brexit, so let's take a look at that. I suspect that the proposition will make Post Brexit UK seem like some sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland. This simply does not make any logical sense. If we take the most pessimistic, worst-case scenario, then the outcome of Brexit will be 5 to 10 years of slow recession, followed by the return to the global trend of economic growth. Now, this is the worst-case scenario. I'm telling you this because it sounds remarkably like the likely outcome of a united Ireland, at best. So what the proposition are arguing is that after 10 years of uncertainty and change, what Northern Ireland needs is a further 10 years of uncertainty and change. Now, I'm not a qualified doctor, but I know that when a patient gets better, you don't turn around and say, you know what, let's give you that again. And that's assuming Brexit is negative, which is definitely not guaranteed. In fact, Brexit opens up exciting opportunities, which my colleagues will discuss later on. Go ahead.
Opportunities for Northern Ireland? Can you name any?
Well, the fact that we'll be moving out of a lot of the EU regulations that have held off industries back will give Northern Ireland a lot of opportunities, but as I say, that is what my colleagues will be focusing on in their debates. The members of the proposition quoted a study by Hubner, which says that even in the short term, a united Ireland will lead to economic growth, unadulterated happiness and free puppies for all. However, this becomes much less interesting whenever you realise two things. The fact that these studies assume drastic austerity once a united Ireland happens, and the fact that that study and many others like it were commissioned directly by Sinn Féin. Now, call me a sceptic, but I struggle to imagine Sinn Féin publishing anything other than something saying that a united Ireland will be great. Don't worry about it, lads. To take the point on border checks, yes, we don't know exactly what form the border will take or what the solution will be. But the fact is, border checks are a vote loser north and south of the border. So the odds of them happening are vanishingly slim. If there's one thing that motivates politicians, it's losing their jobs. Take your point?
What votes really are going to lose when the Tory candidates are normally one of the lowest individuals on the ballot paper? The Tories don't care. That's the truth of it.
I take your point that, or Mr. Chairperson, I take the member's point that the Tories aren't exactly a political powerhouse in Northern Ireland. But the fact is, it will also be a vote loser for politicians in the Republic and in the North, so they will do everything in their power and more to stop it from happening. The proposition also brought up cross-border trade. It's clear that they don't really understand the topic. I work in shop in a centre built in its location because of cross-border trade. That trade happens because there is a border, not in spite of it. Differences in economic policies and in currencies mean that some goods and services are cheaper here, some are cheaper in the Republic. If there were to be a united Ireland, this cross-border trade would slow down greatly, and myself and thousands of other people would be without a job overnight. There are many in this room and beyond.
Just on the benefits to Northern Ireland with Brexit, I have my own views on Brexit, as I'll go into, but what would you say, just to the simple statement that benefits or no benefits, Northern Ireland simply didn't ask for Brexit. The majority voted to remain in the EU.
I take your point that obviously a majority did not vote to stay in the EU, but the fact is that and a united Ireland are two separate issues. It doesn't mean that it wasn't an election between staying in the European Union or leaving the United Kingdom, so to conflate the two simply isn't correct. Now, there are many who get misty-eyed about the idea of a 32-county republic. However, the proposition have got so misty-eyed that they've been blinded to the reality that a united Ireland would be terrible for Ireland. Every year, the UK government sends us billions of pounds in life support. Are the proposition really saying that Ireland would be happy to foot the bill just to satiate a political goal? Are voters in Northern Ireland really going to be happy with services with cuts to every single one of our already overstretched services. Unionists and nationalists alike would be up in arms, maybe not the best choice of words, would not be happy about fewer hospitals, increased waiting times, smaller pensions, and even fewer policemen at a time of great civil unrest. I will not take your point. And I very much doubt that those in the Republic will accept a decade or longer of more crippling austerity, just so that the road signs on the drive to Port Stewart won't be in miles. I know I will not take your point. Post Brexit or not, if you love Ireland, then for heaven's sake, don't unite us. The proposition may ignore the concerns of the unionist community, but you should not. They can play down the threat of disillusionment, unrest, and even violence by saying that people will be willing to forego their identity, their beliefs, and their culture, all for some marginal and fictional increases in GDP. That is a drastic oversimplification. Unless you haven't noticed, some loyalists and some unionists are willing to camp out on Twaddell Avenue whenever a flag or a march is taken away. Is it really ridiculous to say some would resort to violence in a United Ireland? Ladies and gentlemen, it's been nothing short of an honour to address you this evening on such an important issue, in such a wonderful setting, with such great company. What a lot of this boils down to is identity. The fact is that Northern Ireland is now developing its own Northern Irish identity. A lot of people are eschewing or combining the British or Irish identities. We should encourage this, and we should not do anything that will potentially upset that, as a United Ireland would. I urge you to do what's best for Ireland. I urge you to do what's best for Northern Ireland. Keep Northern Ireland part of the UK. I urge you to reject the false promises of the proposition and reject the motion. Thank you all.
Continuing the case for proposition, Mr. Conor.
Steps here, I'm so short. Alright, so Mr. Farry, Mr. Chairperson, esteemed opposition and proposition, members of the House, thank you for having me tonight. It's been quite a while since I had the opportunity to be with the Little, so I'm honoured to be here tonight to discuss such an important question. As some of you may know, I've discussed before, I've been studying in Sweden for the past while, and yesterday I was on Skype with one of the friends that I'd made there, and I had an experience that I think most of us probably have if we've ever left the island of Ireland. I mentioned that I was doing a debate tomorrow, and I told them the motion, and they repeated back to me and said, "This House supports a post-Brexit United Ireland." And I was like, yeah, you know, partition and Belfast and Dublin, and we're all going to be a happy family, and it's going to be great. I thought it was one island, is what she said. So I'm sure some of us might be familiar with that experience, and I suppose my fellow proposition can take heart in the fact that, in the minds of some Swedes at least, we've already won. But tonight we're here for the real deal, so let's get to it. I'm going to throw out a few bombshells tonight, a few radical assertions. The first bombshell, some of you will already know what's coming, and I think it's only healthy to put my cards on the table. I'm in the unique position tonight that not only do I support United Ireland, but I also supported Brexit. I'm one of those rare creatures, a unicorn, a left-wing leaver. You might have read about us, and your parents probably told you to stay away from us. I have my own reasons for supporting Brexit, and if anyone wants to buy me a pint or two after this, I'd be happy to go through it with you. However, matter at hand. Love it or loathe it, Brexit is happening. Love it or loathe it, it would seem it's going to be a hard Brexit, and love it or loathe it, we hadn't, and we never really had a choice in the matter. Northern Ireland in 2017, between Article 50 and what's happening over in Scotland, faces a constitutional crisis unlike anything before, and I would argue tonight an existential crisis. Okay, bombshell number 2. So, Peter in his speech there rightly said towards the start that this should be a matter of logic, it should be a matter of assessing the pros and cons, but unfortunately right at the end brought it back straight to culture and reminded us that we have our culture and identity to protect by staying part of the UK. So in the question of the Irish unity, it's often phrased as some sort of like flowchart, Do you feel Irish? United Ireland. Do you feel British? Stay in Britain. To make my point quickly, because I think it's already roughly been made, or at least it will be, I'm just going to quote a Scottish politician, very interested in Scottish politics myself, Patrick Harvey of the Greens. He said in the 2014 Scottish referendum, soon to be known as the first, he said, "I feel British. My culture is British. I speak English. My ancestors were British. My heritage is a British one. I'm proud to be British." I can see some unionists. So far, so good. But I'm still voting yes. Looking and digesting the arguments, I think, guys, pre-Brexit here, I feel it's what would be best for me and my family and my communities. And here's what's critical for us. The day Scotland becomes independent, I won't feel any less British. My Britishness doesn't come from some constitutional arrangement. It doesn't come from whether decisions are made by people in London or in Hollywood. My sense of Britishness is something inside me that can't be changed by a vote. So I think the point here is tonight that whether we feel British or Northern Irish or Irish, and I feel all three, a United Ireland will change that. If we're to proceed in this debate with dignity and honesty, I think it's impinged upon us that we muster the courage to admit it. Northern Ireland is special. It's not England, and it's not the Republic either. Now the question becomes, why a United Ireland? Scandals and governmental collapses notwithstanding, we have here in Northern Ireland, pardon me, we are here in Northern Ireland often desensitised to how truly dysfunctional, deformed and unusual Northern Irish democracy is at its core. Does it strike no one as fundamentally strange and somewhat anti-democratic that we have and never will ever have any meaningful influence over whether it's the Tories or Labour that sit in the House of Commons? Right-wing Brexiters, I say, from a Exeter here, the take back control rhetoric that we heard over the course of the referendum, I'm with you, I agree with it, but surely the next logical step is to give control to the people of Northern Ireland. I would stretch this so far as to say to unionists, if you think of the demographic position of unionists within the UK, on average, the entire unionist bloc, with all the might, with all their political rhetoric, make up roughly about less than 1% in the House of Commons. In a Dublin Parliament, we make up 20%. Now here's the next bombshell. The United Ireland that I'm putting forward tonight is different, I would say, from other United Irelands that you've heard of before, and that's the point. The United Ireland that we get to make is in our own hands. So, I say, in the United Ireland that I'm advocating for, that we can all push forward together, unionists included, that we should continue and enhance devolution, retain Stormont in some form within an all-Ireland structure. It's a bit spooky. I'm not sure if this has been put forward before, but think about it, let it sink in. Devolution has done wonderful things for us, there's no doubt about that. It's definitely better than direct rule. And there are reasons that are good about devolution that aren't just concerned with our place in the UK, it's a good structure to have. So I would advocate some form of federalism in the United Ireland. That's the first thing.
And that point, sir.
Yes, sir.
If that was the case, we went down the United Ireland route, how would Northern Ireland be funded to the tune of €13 billion, which is about a 20% increase in the total expenditure by the Republic of Ireland government? Where would that money actually come from?
Yeah, I would say, I think arguments that are predicated like that, the implication is that we are going to be joining the Republic. That it's not a case of Northern Ireland with all of its economy and all of its debt, and the Republic of Ireland forming a new economy, forming a new country. It's them just simply being put together like a jigsaw piece, and we're going to become the Republic, and everybody's going to have a Dublin accent, and whenever you turn on the TV, it's just going to be RT on every single channel. It's going to be hell. It's not like that. For the establishment of a new country, it's a new economy, it's a way of starting. To that end, I'll keep going with the bombshells. I'll wrap this up very quickly. I'm talking triple lock protection in the United Ireland, the cultural right of Protestants. I'm talking funding for Ulster Scots, could even make it an official language alongside Irish. I'm talking funding for bands, perhaps. And I'll drop my final bombshells here while I have time. This one seems quite small, but I think that this could be a key ingredient in a shared future for all of us within the United Ireland. Now, I normally put this out just to see how shitters will react. Often it's not well. I already see some looks in the faces, some shitters are looking at me like, what's he going to say? He's going to ruin this for us. I propose in the United Ireland a new flag and a new national anthem. So to summarise, it's not a question of how one feels, it's a question of what's best for us. Northern Ireland and the UK will always be at a fundamental democratic disadvantage. We will never have serious self-determination while we stay in the UK. Number 3, United Ireland doesn't have to be the Republic of Sinn Féin. I think we should, could and will achieve continued devolution with a triple lock protection of cultural rights, as well as a brand new flag and a national anthem. I beg you, support the motion.
Continue for the opposition to George Chapman.
First, Mr. Chair, I'm grateful for explaining the instructions of this debate earlier, because this is the first time in my life that I ever listen, watch, or participate in a university debate. So please bear with me. Very shortly, I will address some of the points that were made by the proposition. But before that, I just need to introduce myself. This is my first day in this great hall, and I don't know any familiar faces here. My name is George Jabour. My surname is spelled Jabour. You might be wondering why I'm spelling my surname. The reason for that is that I'm the Conservative candidate in Belfast South in the upcoming staff election in Northern Ireland. I'm just trying to make it easier for you to recognise my name so you can vote for me in the election, because this election might be very tight and I might end up winning by a couple of votes only. And on this note, actually, I would like to ask a very serious question about this debate, which is, if I end up winning this election by one vote, and would my mandate be weaker than another assembly member who wins by a much larger margin? And the answer is no, because in the morning after the election, all the successful assembly members will be equal, regardless of their majority. And this means that the outcome of the EU referendum must be respected and accepted, whether it was won or decided by a single vote or by millions of votes. And that's a fundamental point about democracy. I think by now you might have noticed that English is not my first language. I am actually an immigrant. I was born in Syria and I came here when I was 22 years old in 2004. I can definitely tell the speaker who talked before me that even although I used to live in Syria, but I knew that Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. So I disagree with your friend over there. And I must highlight that the key difference between my life in my old country and my life in my new home is democracy. And the difference in our country is that we give people the choice, the trust to make decisions about important things in their lives through elections and referendum. Yes, go ahead, please.
You see, that's your first mistake. Giving people a choice.
Yes, and so there are many people around the world who have called for democracy, and I think democracy is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. It is sometimes it leads to things that we don't agree with. But if we can ever call ourselves a democratic society, then it doesn't mean that we should accept outcomes that we agree with. We would be democratic if we accept outcomes that we disagree with. That is the essence of democracy. I just need to make some progress because I still have many points to make in a very short period of time. So as one country, we voted to Brexit. So it's our duty all as Democrats to respect this result and make a success out of it. One of the things that I think are wonderful about Brexit is immigration. And if you are an EU citizen who comes to Britain, you can come here very easily and have employment opportunities and benefit from all the great things that the United Kingdom offers. However, if you come from outside of the EU, then you have to jump through hoops. I, for example, from my own experience, know how difficult that is. I was able to come here simply because I was lucky enough to win a scholarship that enabled me to study for a postgraduate degree. And I was able to remain here because I was accepted as a highly skilled migrant. With Brexit, we can decide our own laws. We can have an immigration policy that treats everyone in the world everyone equally, regardless of their nationality. Sorry, I just need to make a few points very quickly. So by Brexit, we are going to stop discriminating against people based on their nationality or date of or place of birth, and that's very important. Another reason why I think Brexit is going to be a success is because we will be able to design our own laws, so we could become more competitive in effectively building on our strength. And I think that is a very important thing, that Brexit is going to be a success, because not going to be a success only for England or for London or for Wales or Scotland. It's going to be a success for everyone in this country. And I know some of the speakers earlier mentioned about how Northern Ireland could prosper, but I think unfortunately their analysis was a little bit flawed, because they didn't actually take into account the advantage that Northern Ireland have as a result of being part of the United Kingdom. And I will elaborate on this point very shortly. But before that, I wanted to highlight that financial services, for example, is one of the sectors that has been addressed as a concern post Brexit. I find it very ironic that many of the people many, frankly speaking, left-wing politicians who spend their lives attacking banks and financial firms are now concerned about the financial services in this country. And I actually work in financial services. I was employed by Goldman Sachs in the past. However, I must stress that I'm not a fat cat bankster. In fact, I set up a business to help public sector organizations in order to deal with losses they incurred when banks took advantage of them. But I think that we get a good deal on financial services and on other sectors, and that will help us as a country, as a united country, to prosper in every single region here. And on Scotland, I just wanted to highlight that I lived there during the Scottish independence referendum. And one of the things that I campaigned for Scotland to remain as part of the UK, during that campaign, the SNP didn't care about the single market. They wanted to take Scotland outside of the UK and outside of the single market, because of course if Scotland was independent, they would not have access to the single market. However, now they've discovered that actually they love the single market. And what's frustrating me about all the positions of the people who are trying to advocate for the breakup of the union is that actually they are trying to come up with any excuse in order to divide this great nation. And I think that's completely unacceptable. Their positions are completely inconsistent with what they have said in the past. And voters will see through this. Thank you very much. I think Brexit is going to be a huge success. It's going to be a huge opportunity for this country. But before we do that, I need your first preference vote on the 2nd of March on election day. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. A caharlí an mótórí agus lucht éisteachta. Fáilte Goji and Díaz Brachtasha, so you can see what side I'm going to be on basically. So, Chairperson, fellow debaters, esteemed opposition, thank you very much for allowing me to speak tonight. I just have a couple of quick rebuttals before I get into my actual speech. We heard a wee bit about austerity, and that is a bit rich talking about austerity when the Irish people in the north have had to be subject to austerity from the Westminster government. I don't think the Irish people actually want it, but they don't have a real choice in the matter because we're obviously under the Tories. Secondly, economics. We were talking about who's going to be subsidising us next and who's going to prop us up next. Is this really meant to be the kind of debate we're having? We are actually saying who is going to keep this stagnant economy going next, because that's all Britain cares about, just keeping us ticking over. And it's absolutely a disgrace that we have to talk about who's just going to put the money in next, because we should be making our own money, but obviously that's not happening. Just thirdly, the topic of immigration was raised. That's what Brexit won on. Brexit won on people capitalising on fear and bigotry towards immigrants. That's what it was won on. So, no, not yet. I'm only 2 seconds in. Fourth, I just want to say there is absolutely no plan for the border. I hope one of you is going to bring it up, but it's going to be a head sort. So anyway, I'll just get into mine. So, yes, ladies and gentlemen, I want to start with a quote from the great man himself, Michael Collins, who said that the treaty was less left our island divided gave us not the ultimate freedom that all nations desire, but the freedom to achieve it. In other words, that treaty and this division was not meant to be permanent. That was meant to be a first step on the road to all Irish unity. So as anybody who knows me can tell you, the cause of Irish unity is the single greatest political goal of my life and of many of my peers. And there are many reasons for this, but basically I think that our progress as a people will be slower and our rights harder to win if we stick with Britain. I earnestly believe that it's only through United Ireland that we can pursue all the other campaigns that we feel so passionate about, because the truth is it's only through United Ireland that we will be in a country and in a populace that actually cares what happens to the people in the north of Ireland. Britain doesn't care right now, and that's the cold hard truth, really. So yeah, tonight I would like to talk to you more about how the cause of Irish unity must be furthered by this generation, and mainly because of the situation we now find ourselves. We are deeply under threat under the British government, or as I like to refer to, occupation. Jokes. Kind of. But so basically, this won't come as a shock to any of you, but Britain doesn't care about anybody here. On every major issue, the will of the people in the north of Ireland is ignored, their rights are threatened, their livelihoods are discarded. It doesn't matter whether it's on Syrian airstrikes, whether it's on Trident, whether it's on every general election, whether it's on Brexit. Brexit is just the most recent example of the British arrogance, which says that it doesn't matter how the north of Ireland thinks, it doesn't matter how we vote, England will always decide our fate. And ladies and gentlemen, that runs completely contrary to our most basic right. Go on, Peter.
Surely that's just democracy. Brexit was a vote by the United Kingdom for the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland can't reap the benefits of staying within the United Kingdom, and then when a democratic vote happens, just abstain from it. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, but you're talking about a democratic vote there. The majority of people in the north of Ireland democratically voted to remain in the EU, and if you think that the Brexit is for a minute concerned, worried, stressed, or if you think Northern Ireland is keeping Theresa May up at night, you've got another thing coming. Nobody cares over there about us. Even, except for yourself, obviously. So basically, yes, I'm proud to call myself a Democrat, and I'm personally and politically affronted every day by the inability of citizens in the north of Ireland to elect a leader of a country. It's absolutely ridiculous, and if it was happening anywhere else, we wouldn't be standing for it. And I just want to draw your attention to as well, we have got 4 Tories opposite us, one of who is an Englishman. Ireland has listened to enough Craig Millers in our time. We don't need another one. So just keep that in mind when an Englishman tells you how to live your life and how to run your country. Don't listen to them.
I mean, it's not like... obviously there is an Englishman on the panel, but I don't feel defined by the place where I came from. Your side as well wants the best for both the South, Northern Ireland, the UK, and European allies. I don't think questioning our judgment to where we're born is a great way to go forward.
I understand that, and it was a joke. And the fact that he's an Englishman, I'm just drawing attention to the fact that we're always told what to do about him, so you know what I mean. So England basically will always decide our fate, and it's true that Brexit in particular, because it is mentioned in the motion, will affect the north of Ireland more than any other part of the Union. Our peace process is based on EU law, the continuation of peace is based on EU funding to communities, our economy relies on the EU massively and its subsidies, and we didn't vote for Brexit, is the most important thing for me anyway. Why would Theresa May listen? No, there's no votes to be won here. They don't run candidates here. We don't vote for them here. We simply watch. Oh, sorry. I meant, realistic. Great, keep your hand up. They don't run, no, now I'm going to go there. So we basically watch every 5 years as a new government is elected by England and imposes their will on foreign soil, and that does not sound like democracy to me. So given this desperate situation that I'm painting, I think we should continue to push for Fenianism and push for United Ireland. Continue to work with Collins, Connolly, Pearson, Plunkett, I know I'm loving it. Reject this British government, which still governs through colonial pride, and affirm that the British government has no right in Ireland, never had any right in Ireland, and never can have any right in Ireland. That is why I'm asking you tonight to join me in continuing the work of thousands of Irish men and women who have died throughout the centuries. And on a serious note, all these people are fighting for, all these people are dying for and pushing for, is we just want to control our own affairs. We don't want a foreign government telling us how to live, what to do, what budget we can have. We just want to rule ourselves, and that's been the case throughout history. So we have fought colonial oppression for centuries, and we should keep doing it. So just because we are the last does not mean we can be forgotten. And I also do want to make a point, because I know I'm saying a lot of things in humour here tonight, but there will be a place for everyone in the New Ireland, and we can share a culture specific to our unique heritage, faithful to our history, and confident about our future. So I just want to end on another quote, because I'm just using everyone I love here. So my point will never be to lament wrongs for the sake of lamenting or self-pity, but we do need to correct those wrongs. So in the words of Michael Collins, give us the future, we've had enough of your past. Give us back our country to live in, to grow in, to love. Thank you.
Well, first of all, before I get into my main points, I feel like I need to address a few ones that have been brought up so far. First of all, I don't believe that the Brexit referendum was a vote on the constitutional status of Northern Ireland. I fundamentally believe that because there was a vote, and it was split in Northern Ireland in particular between the communities. But I was boots on the ground. I've talked to a lot of people, even in unionist constituencies, who were concerned in the referendum not on constitutional issues, but on things like the economy, in particular the effect that Brexit might have on the local housing market. While in England, concerns about identity and immigration trumped those of economics, which was the primary rhetoric of the Remain side, it didn't necessarily define that here. There was a lot of noise to signal ratio, in particular the referendum. So I don't think that democratic point is sufficient. My partner Craig will address that in full. Second of all, it seemed almost as if... no, let me finish the rebuttals first. It seems as if Connor's flowery dream of a future United Ireland was contradicted almost by what was brought up afterwards. Seemingly, I think it needs to be recognised that while the triumph of one side in the ethno-religious struggles of Northern Ireland would be an important achievement for them, that is to the would be disastrous for the unionist community. Just as the repealing of something similar to an Irish Language Act would be seen as a triumph by the unionists, it is equally detrimental to Republicans, and we must accept that reality of Northern Ireland, that a middle ground needs to be achieved somewhere in between, and that is the nature of partition. Even if it was meant to be a temporary solution, it has ended up over the years evolved into a wider process for peace. So I've got two, actually, yeah, fair.
Yeah, just I'll pick up on that really quickly. Yeah, and there are going to be different versions of United Ireland coming from this proposition. But that's the point. It's flexible, you know. The point we're trying to get across is a United Ireland is a chance for us to do something new. But whatever we do, the United Ireland is better than staying.
Okay, I take your point. I'll address the different models in my speech. But yeah, good point. I was just saying, it seemed radically different, and I could see that as verging on sectarian potentially. So my two main points is this. One, the economic model for reunification is insufficient. And two, that a neutral identity tied to Northern Ireland, civic unionism, is still possible and is a very good way to deal with the issues that are plaguing our power sharing arrangement. So, why then we tie ourselves to an economy that has already had economic weaknesses revealed? We've seen with the euro crisis the ECB's inability to deal with this. The ECB's inability to manage interest rates Europe-wide has spilled over into the Italian referendum, no confidence on the European ability to manage its own economics. We saw how TTIP, a simple free trade agreement, was just turned into a toxic, all-encompassing agreement that threatened to invade our health services. We saw how a Belgian district
held up the CETA programme, and even look at the entire history of the Common Agricultural Policy, the European project is littered with failures in ability to deal with specific provincial issues.
On that point.
Okay, go ahead. But after this, we need to deal with the rest of it.
Thank you. I would just like to say that you said the EU has failed to specifically deal with provincial issues. I would argue that Westminster has failed to specifically address the provincial issues that we have here and has done so over the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag, but I want more power for Northern Ireland and I want more self-determination, and I think the best path for that is staying within the United Kingdom's larger project. So, why then would we stick with the United Kingdom? Well, PwC recently released a report comparing the United Kingdom's prospects with other EU 27 countries, and it showed that the inherent advantages with the UK's economy, specifically in the banking sector, but also with other areas such as a greater share of working population, an advanced economy, and in Northern Ireland specifically, an expanding cultural base and financial capital, means that the prospects for staying within are stronger than tying ourselves to an Ireland which, while remains competitive and will have an edge, as certainly a lot of businesses consider moving there, over the course of 40 years, it will be outcompeted within the other East 27 countries, and that might involve austerity packages that would most definitely hit Northern Ireland, seeing as economically it's the most vulnerable person. Sorry, I've already taken some points, I just need to deal with this. Okay, so, as I like to do, I like to go to historical, to look for historical examples of how things work. I want to believe in a plan like Connor's, which serves every element of the community, but I just don't see plans sufficient. I don't see models that aren't either jury-rigged to be simple propaganda from one party or the other, or either start at a conclusion and work backwards with the facts to get there. So I was reading recently Civic Unionism in 19th century Belfast, and there was one line which just struck me. It struck me because it was so alien. Is it described Belfast as the Athens of the North. It described the core culture of Derry, of Newry and Belfast as being defined by these progressive ideals of civic, cultural, scientific and political progress. It saw how the dissenters and the young Republicans allied themselves with causes such as anti-slavery and Catholic emancipation. How then can this model of Ulster liberalism, which is defined by shared principles, not ethno-religious grounds, can form the basis of a more stable, prosperous Northern Ireland? And is that not a better path to take than simply throwing our dice in with a potential new future? Anyway, I'll round up really quick because Craig, I'm sure, is ready to go in terms of developing these ones. The euro has serious structural issues, and there are doubts that the E27 project will live in its current form in 100 years. But ultimately, and as important as it is, we're talking about an identity. Do we want to form an identity that is tied so inextricably to the causes of the past, or do we want to move forward and have a global vision of a better future for both communities, that everyone is important? And I rest my case, and I beg the House to slancher the Queen.
Don't know where to stand, the steps behind me. Thank you, Chair. Members of the House, Chair, esteemed members of the opposition, I'm just going to start with some quick rebuttal before moving on to our closing argument and my main argument, which is going to be perhaps more philosophical musing on the nature of the nation. Starting with rebuttal, I utterly refute the point that any arguments coming from our side of the House are sectarian. They quite simply are not. None of us believe in that. None of us believe in discriminating against any person. And I will move on, and it's been touched on already by speakers, to detail how every culture can be protected, and indeed every culture can only really finally properly flourish in a new united Ireland.
Another argument coming from this side of the House seems to be purely economic, purely based on getting money from Westminster, which is a legitimate point. But are we really going to forfeit in the end our national self-determination in favour of money? It really is the choice between English rule with no choice with money or national self-determination, which I believe is more important. And just one final piece of rebuttal. You talked about Ulster liberalism. What happened to it? I would hardly call the Union a state that existed up until 1972, which rejected the National Health Service and specifically discriminated against the minority in its community as liberal. But moving on. Of my nation. What is my nation? Who talks of my nation? These are the words spoken by Captain Macmorris in Henry V, the only Irish character featured in any of Shakespeare's works. In these words, written in 1599 and referring to a time 100 years before even this, it revealed the seemingly eternal truth of an Irish national identity. Its unfixed, uncertain nature. Macmorris's name reveals to us that he is a descendant of Norman settlers in Ireland, the Fitzmaurices, with the Gaelic Mac prefix adopted by Norman lords that they assimilated to Irish society, becoming what was called the Old English in Ireland. The captain questions his identity because he is uncertain of what he really is. Is he Norman, or English, or Irish, or neither, or all of them? His question, what is my nation, is still relevant to Ireland today. Indeed, it's at the heart of this debate. It's the question that has permeated and continues to permeate almost all aspects of life on this island. Our response to that question governs many aspects of our lives. What flags we salute, what schools we attend as children. It may determine what languages we choose to learn, what songs we sing, what sports we play and watch. And for some people in Northern Ireland, it may continue to determine what friends we keep and, unfortunately, what riots we attend. So what is my nation? 4 words, a short question, usually met with a short response. My nation is Ireland, says Hugh O'Neill and Wolfe Tone and Redmond and Pearce. My nation is Ireland, says also Carson, the great unionist leader of the last century. But as well, my nation is Britain, he adds. And in more recent times, my nation is Northern Ireland, is a response from a growing number of people in this part of the country, as revealed in the latest Life and Times survey. My nation is the Irish Republic, says perhaps the Dubliner, but he is only referring exclusively to the 26-county state that currently exists south of the border.
Mr. Chairperson?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. The member raised the point in a question that the United Kingdom government had failed to deal with local issues. That's plainly ridiculous. Under the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland has gone from violence to peace. We've moved from an economic backwater to an increasingly successful economy. To just ignore all the success of Northern Ireland under UK government simply is ludicrous.
I really think you can't spin the peace that was achieved in 1998 as being achieved solely by the aims of the British government, which led a 20-year almost armed campaign which did not achieve peace. But moving on, other people might say of the nation, I don't care about my nation, I only care about my health and my job and my family, while another says that the nation is the most important thing to him. But what I was striving to convey is the muddled, endlessly complex, at once multifaceted and singular, simultaneously defined and undefined, within and without, magnetic north and compassless indirection that is the Irish national identity. The material effect of everyone's respective responses to this question, what is my nation, has been conflict, and in many ways it continues to be conflict, and this debate is a manifestation of that conflict, of our conflicting national identities. But what we need is a new response. We need an answer to this question that works for everyone on this island, an answer that respects our difference but solidifies our unity in the things that matter. A response sprung for the desire for peace in this land, not war, because we've had enough of war and of division and hate and cyclical conflict. But what can this response be? How can we find an answer to a question so endlessly divisive, and does such an answer exist? Well, I firmly and sincerely believe that it does, and it does take a certain amount of idealism to contemplate, but I would present a hopeful view of the future rather than, in my opinion, the hopeless view presented by the opposition. We must answer the question, but this new answer cannot be found in the current constitutional arrangements of Northern Ireland. The answer to the old question lies in something new, a new identity for all and a new unified Irish nation. The House has already heard the arguments from us as to why United Ireland is the best way forward for all on this island, politically, economically, culturally and socially. But it is important that in a new Ireland, a new national identity is forged. based on the concept of civic nationalism, the middle ground that indeed the opposition did mention in the form of civic unionism. This nationality will be inclusionary rather than exclusionary, based on the equal rights of all citizens. This national identity will not be defined by any one culture or ethnicity. It will place parity of esteem on all cultures and traditions, on harp and crown and cross and crescent and shamrock and tulip and green and orange and every colour in between. Our Irishness will no longer be defined by what sect we belong to. There will be no true Irish culture or religion or tradition. There will be an identity that we can all get behind. I think of the likes of places like London, full of people of all faiths and traditions, of all races and ethnicities, who can proudly stand up and say together, I am a Londoner. There is no reason we cannot work together in this way. Excuse me. We all live on this island together. We work together, laugh together, cry together, live together, and love together. So why should we not work together? The benefits of United Ireland have been outlined to the House, and I ask you to further consider the benefits of a new national identity, a new identity that can only flourish in a new Ireland, well, not defined by ethnicities and cultures and religion, but defined by our shared values, respect for equality, and the rule of law. What is my nation, if the House will permit me to continue for just a second? My nation is a democracy, a true democracy where all citizens have an equal voice, a land of poets and dreamers, mountains and myths, song and sorrow, of equality and respect, of new hope and grand destiny for everyone who lives here. What is my nation? My nation is Ireland. Thank you.
Chair, President, ladies and gentlemen. Jason took off the gloves, so I'm going to carry on that trend in a minute. But first, I'd just like to ask everybody here a question. Who here actually thinks Brexit will make your lives better if we stay in the UK in 5 years' time? I just have a show of hands. Does anybody think it's going to be better? A couple of people. So effectively we're arguing from a place of your lives are going to be worse in your own minds, therefore we should have a united Ireland. It's not really been talked about by proposition how Brexit may actually make our lives better, and if our lives are then better, more prosperous, then have a vote to board a poll on whether or not we should have a united Ireland. Now, I'm all for democracy. We've had a Good Friday Agreement, in which I think it was 80 to 81% turnout, and there was 72% of people who voted in favour of it. So surely we should be honouring the Good Friday Agreement if we say, as we are, that we're Democrats. We should be allowing a border poll, where we shouldn't just be voting as a House in favour of a united Ireland. We should be putting it to the people, as and when the plan that the UK have decided may make our lives better be enacted and be carried out, and we can finally see with a degree of pragmatism whether or not the vote, in which again we had 72% turnout, thought their lives would be better off. Now I'm not going to stand up here and say that everybody agrees with my version of Brexit. I don't believe in a hard Brexit. I think it's going to economically damage us. I believe in a Brexit in which all we can do is start making our own trade deals. And that's the main thing that I think is important from a Brexit platform. I think if we could make our own trade deals whilst we didn't actually care how many migrants flowed through the UK, we as a UK and probably as an island of Ireland would be a more prosperous place. And to me, that is where I come from here. A place where potentially in 5 years' time, I believe we will be more prosperous. And so at that point, we as the people should decide whether or not a united Ireland is in place. We should not be throwing democracy down the drain and just be insisting on a united Ireland, which is something that especially Jason decided upon. It's a bit like me saying, I want a united Ireland under the Union. Again, it's exactly the same thing. You stand up here and talk about fenianism. You stand up here talking about effectively a call to arms. You do your best Jerry Adams impression, and you don't expect Belfast to turn into the next Basra, right? I'm sorry. So I'm going to take you back to the first time I went to vote, and it was a very happy day of my life. I'd always been interested in politics, and I was living in Manchester at the time. And I lived in a hardcore Labour area, and that made me sick to my stomach. And I basically did what any Tory would do. I voted tactically to get Labour out, and I voted for the Lib Dems. Something I'm a little bit again sick about now, but I waited up till 6 in the morning. Lo and behold, the Liberals got in, something I was actually happy about. Looking back on it, I don't know why. And it was a great day of my life. I got to vote. I got to engage in democracy. If we go down the route that the proposition are suggesting of having a united Ireland before we've even possibly seen the outcomes of Brexit, we are throwing democracy down the drain. Yeah, go on, Stu.
Okay, you're aware that the Good Friday Agreement was essentially scrapped last night? You realise that?
Okay, thanks. I think what we've got to say with regards to the Good Friday Agreement is that whilst we are negotiating with a bunch of tyrants, the EU, we cannot possibly say we're going to be going into any firm preconditions because it's putting us at a much weaker position. And that's the problem right now with the amendments that got called for last night. In reality, I support most of them. And if we weren't dealing with such a bunch of tyrants, then we could have put them into place preemptively rather than going into negotiations with our hands tied behind our backs. So voting against the amendments last night was literally just saying, we know what we're dealing with, they're a bunch of animals, and we are going to have to go in there with as much freedom as possible to get the best possible deal for the UK. And it's only at that point, once you've got the best possible deal for the UK, then we should put it again to the people, and there should be a border poll. Not, we want a united Ireland, regardless of the fact that people, based on the Good Friday Agreement, got to decide and voted on the fact that there would be a say. We can't just ignore that democracy as much as Jason would love to.
On that point, sir.
Go on.
Everything I said in that speech was about democracy. Like literally every word is about democracy.
I thought you were about to stand up and tell people to pick up their arms, mate. I'm sorry, that's basically where you were going. I literally thought I was looking at a younger Jerry Adams, sort of dark-haired Malcolm McGuinness, not somebody that's meant to be a pragmatic university debater.
There's nothing in that.
We've already got a huge amount of democratic deficit in the UK. We've got first past the post, which in my opinion is one of the worst ways in which you can run a country. People don't actually have a say when they go out to vote already. You've got people that stood up on both sides of the Brexit campaign, lying through their teeth, and that was for Remain and for Leave. And they're not being held to account now. They should be. Boris Johnson, I say this as a Tory, should be thrown in jail. Right? The guy literally stood up for 6 weeks solid and just lied. We cannot allow that to continue, and basically voting for this motion is going down that line. Effectively, when you've got Connor's argument, you've basically got the magical budget, which is falling into the SNP's line. And I'll take him back to one of his favourite politicians, the Greens here, who I think it was Caroline Lucas, who in reference to a question of when should we stop borrowing money, her response was, when they stop lending it to us. I.e., his political outlook is bankruptcy. And I'm sorry, that's exactly what would happen if you went down his line of a united Ireland. You're going to bankrupt Ireland, then you're going to come back to the Union going, please, can you take us? That will be what happens with your line. Now, look, I'm all for people wanting to borrow money. Okay, at the end of the day, how else do you get a house? We need a degree of stimulus spending in a country, I get that. But how on earth can you get the Irish government, who've got a total current expenditure of £62 billion, that's their entire budget, trying to cough up another £13 billion? That's a 20% increase on what they spent. They argue in the Dáil over £16 million here and £20 million here. We're talking about 13 billion quid. That's a huge amount of money. I feel like all that the proposition have done, is basically taken on the debate. This House wants a united Ireland. They've just decided to ignore the post-Brexit part, and that's a little bit sad in my opinion, because there's a lot of nuances in that debate, such as Jason briefly mentioned. Does anyone mind if I carry on for 5 minutes?
Yes.
Maybe 2.
I'll allow you 2 minutes.
Thank you. Now, I agree, Jason, that there are going to be difficulties. It's not going to be a constitutional crisis. I think it's going to be a logistical problem, having a non-border between part of the EU and part of the UK. Okay, so, and it's going to basically adversely affect people in Northern Ireland. You're going to start probably seeing passport controls in and out of Northern Irish airports. You're going to start seeing more regulations to buy, rent houses and to get jobs. It's the only way you can effectively square that circle. If you don't want to have a border there, you have to effectively treat people travelling through Northern Ireland and need a passport rather than just coming through on a library card, which is what I do every week. That those sort of luxuries are probably going to be gone, which is why I'm not surprised there's no DUP candidates on this side of the House, because I don't actually understand why they took the political stance they took. It will make a border more difficult, but it's not an impossible thing. There are plenty of plans there to go into effect which will increase the amount of thinking that needs to be done, rather than being an actual constitutional crisis.
What plans? Your 4 of you are Conservatives. What plans is there for the border?
What's that?
What plans are there for the border?
Okay. I think the fact that Theresa May has put it down as her initial first point, right, on her thought process shows the importance of it. Right, if you speak to people that are involved in the actual process of making the plans, you'll see that there's going to be an increase in severity of getting in and out of Northern Ireland. So, I need to close up here. So, I just missed all of this one. So effectively, we've got to think about this. I go back to my original point. Now, I think one person in their room put their hand up when I said, who here thinks their life is going to be better off post-Brexit? It was one person. I think we should be waiting to see if Brexit makes our lives better or worse before we even start thinking about a change in the constitution of the United Kingdom and Ireland. I urge you to vote against this motion.
Thank you very much for that debate this evening. We're now going to take some questions from the floor because I think both sides have had it a little too easy tonight. So if you have any difficult questions you'd like to ask of either side, we'll start off with questions to the proposition. Mr. Ardle, if you'd like to ask a question to the proposition.
Mr. Chairman, members of the House, to the members of the proposition. I want to ask them to engage in comparative with the opposition problem about spending. And the first 2 speakers on the proposition have stood up and said, in fact, the first speaker stands up and says that there should be no 2 services, that it is inefficient that we have 2 NHSs, 2 civil services. The second speaker stands up and says that we will have more jobs in Northern Ireland. But considering that, as Gringo has pointed out, 13 billion of Northern Ireland's money comes from the United Kingdom. 93% of Stormon's block grant spending comes from the United Kingdom. In a United Ireland, where the largest recruiter of jobs in Northern Ireland is the civil service and the public sector, if there is a United Ireland where there is less jobs in the civil service, there is going to be less employment in Northern Ireland. And do not worry of the tensions that's going to cause when less people have jobs as a result.
I'm happy enough to start on this, and then Richard might pick up on that. But for any of the oppositionally minded people here tonight, I think we can put it this way. You need to have it one of 2 ways. Okay? Either Northern Ireland is entirely dependent, or very much dependent, on the rest of them. It's subsidised by the nation. And therefore, surely, has completely failed as an economic experiment. Or it's the other way around, and it's actually been very successful, the partition worked, and therefore, for reasons of self-determination, it's imperative that we consider the question of whether or not more indeed I'm prepared to concede in, say, 5 years.
Opposition, would you like to offer a response to that?
I'm just going to take on the duplication of services a bit here. There is actually very little of any duplication of healthcare provision within Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland, because it's impossible, or it would be completely impractical to do so. If you just take all the Galvin and Dublin as 2 sort of centres of excellence, actually, for, say, heart treatment, if you live in the north-west part of Ireland, you actually get all your heart treatment done in all the Galvin. So you have a heart attack, in Ireland, you'll be coming over the border to get treated in Orthogal. Right, and that goes to this, and if you have a baby that's born with a heart condition anywhere in Northern Ireland, you actually get shipped down to Dublin. So there is no duplication. It's actually treated as a homogenous service. So the duplication that's talked about by the proposition is actually not there. They clearly have no idea about how the NHS and the Republic of Ireland healthcare system is structured. But you think you can take them seriously?
And do we have any questions for the opposition level? You there, sir, at the very back. If you'd just like to stand up and state your name for the record.
Mr. President, my question is for the opposition, of course, and I find this sort of something that the voters tend to ignore also in their arguments. We heard the figures from the Parliament Council, even the budget that is organized by the UK government, which is $1 billion that's fine, there's no reason to say that should reduce in the future. But there's also the matter of European regional development fund. Like Northern as an extension part of the UK has benefited in large way more than any other part, particularly in boosting the infrastructure of Northern Ireland, which of course has suffered a great many years from neglect, in some regions more associated with national security. How then would the opposition propose in a post-Brexit Northern Ireland, how would the UK government seek to supplement or replace the extensive funding and the vital funding for the funding version in that need of this infrastructure to compete with some EU member state emerging providers?
Opposition? Mr. Derek?
Along with the rebates that we got were also included in that 350 million point figure, which is why it was often the grey truth almost in the campaign that you could even be accused of lying to bring it up and completely truthful. But especially with not just the development fund, but also the CAP funding of local farmers, which is very important to a lot of the economic security of people here. However, the problem with this is that there have been policies considered in Parliament to address the funding imbalance, particularly since also Wales has the same problem, where it's also quite dependent on funding from outside. In particular, we've been trying to get diversified capital inside Northern Ireland's economic system. But let's just bring it all into perspective here. We're talking a difference between 350 million and a £13 billion deficit with the reunification plan that was going through. So we're comparing apples to peanuts here. If we want a viable economic model, and I believe everyone in this room does want this to see, you need to work on the position of including this capital from the United Kingdom. You can't block it off and claim to be, because no country can claim autonomy these days. It's just not how the global economy works.
Mr. Gallagher, I see a change to respond.
It's almost as if the opposition didn't read the report from the University of British Columbia that I did. It's almost as if they had written their speeches before they were aware of that. Because, the money is there from the Republic. After 8 years, €35.6 billion the economy will be improved by on a yearly basis. The money is there from Northern Ireland. And you know what, you've got, you can't be guaranteed you're going to get it from the Conservatives, which we're all aware of that. You will be able to guarantee that you'll get it from Dublin because you have a 30% block in the Donegal area. You will get that money, and you might actually have a chance of making Northern Ireland something more than just a failed state.
You've had your opportunity to respond. Does anyone have any sort of abstaining points on the motion? They might perhaps have a question they'd like to ask sort of equally to both sides. Is that a hand actually raised by Mr. Rogers?
Everyone seems to be quite pleased with achieving the status, which is really more of a cultural issue than anything else. There's about a solid 38% who will be shoehorned into international aid. However, as the point was made by Mr. Beck at the start of the debate, that of the benefits that Northern Ireland gets from cross-border trade, expanding that, there is a vast benefit of cross-border economy, with the improvement of the rail network, projects in the Narrow Water Bridge, which would open the Norfolk investment project. So, going from that point, do you think both Brexit would have a more I know something like there. For clarification to Mr. Bunting, that report, give us the future we've had enough of your past. Those were actually the words of Liam Neeson, rather than
Proposition, do you have first response? If you do indeed want to respond.
Then I'll throw something out there, I guess. So what was it again? Do we want Ireland to be more united?
More united.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think it surprises anyone that we want Ireland to be more united post Brexit. I just think that something quickly that I'll pick up that I think addresses all these points is that I've said more than once that my vision of a post Brexit United Ireland was rather rosy. I don't deny that, it's pretty sweet. But I don't deny the difficulties in achieving the United Ireland if a vote was ever to go ahead. But to the opposition, I say, look, without addressing the issue of self-determination, then we're sort of stuck here. I mean, we were told by the second speaker, essentially, that the issue of self-determination is just, that's the rules. I mean, they vote for Labour, they vote for Tories, and we get either, and that's just the way it is. Done, that's democracy. Without addressing this issue, whenever you're saying that Northern Ireland would struggle economically, or does struggle economically, all you're telling us is that Northern Ireland has failed as an economic and political project. And when you do it the other way around, all you're telling us is that we are indeed actually ready for United Ireland because, for the reasons of self-determination. That's clear.
Would opposition like to respond to that?
If I may respond, Mr. Chairperson. Firstly, the point many times is debate I've been called a Tory. I know I'm wearing a suit, but let's not jump to any conclusions based on that. Understandable. But we spoke about self-determination. We said yes, there should be a border poll at a certain time. We are in favour of that. But also the question was about more united. I think we're implying by that more united, more trade, more working together in that sense, and of course we're for that. And I'm also like to raise a point: a more united Northern Ireland is one where there's less division. All trying to get a united Ireland is going to do is increase the amount of division in our society. We have moved on leaps and bounds. I'm from Liverpool, which is something I probably shouldn't admit on. But that's a town that has gone from not being able to drive up the centre of it because of the divisions to now a town where people get on with each other, which is great. So we should not risk moving ourselves back from that more united Northern Ireland just for a united Ireland.
We'll take another question from inside. I'm interested to get some people who haven't appeared before the House before to ask questions. So if you've never appeared in the letter before, I'll take a question from yourself. So yourself, sir, if you'd like to state your name for the record.
Do both sides accept that a referendum is a danger for parliamentary democracy?
Proposition?
Maybe just a bit. Could you elaborate? Why was Parliament created in the first place? Is it not to elect those who can better decide with the information rather than to give it to the public? Decide emotion.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is a threat. I'm not a fan of referendums. I think things should be settled by representatives in Parliament.
Could you just speak up a little bit so the rest of the House can hear?
Sorry, yeah, I do support what you really said about referendums are a threat to Parliament, and I do think governance is better when it is representatives making these decisions, and so yeah, there's definitely some truth in that. I don't think it really changes anything here, you know. Yeah, you might say a border poll. Would it be better a border poll, or would it be better to storm it to decide? I'm not, the motion doesn't specify that, so I'm not going to comment on it.
And anyone from the opposition want to take on that? Mr. Derry?
Can I just ask a question? Did you mean on the original Brexit referendum or on the
referendum just in January?
Oh, okay. It's actually a very good question because I noticed this with the Scottish one, beginning with, in that there wasn't necessarily legislation on the table that dictated, for example, how even the ballot was meant to be organised. The difference between yes and no in particular affected the psychology of voters and what was actually relevant electorally. I think there is a way around it and keeping Parliament in process. Obviously gets complicated. And then we're talking about negotiations, and then of course the executive kind of needs to take the leading role with authorisation directly from the people, which is kind of the other way around Parliament doing that. But I think if Parliament sets out the exact terms of what the executive can do in the event of a successful referendum, or the terms in which new ones can be brought, for example, if over a certain amount of MPs vote for it, over 40% of people believe strongly in a topic, and border poll in particular, then the Secretary of State might be involved directly. And then, of course, there's a great amount of respect among MPs to respect popular decisions when they're made directly like that. So yeah, there is a way around it, but you're right in saying it's definitely something very new for the parliamentary system. I think in future referendums we'll see it narrowed down, more efficient, and more democratic how the terms of the referendum are set out. But yeah, good question.
And the question to the opposition, Professor Dorr.
Would the proposition not agree that one of the most powerful points on behalf of the proposition was made by the final speaker for the opposition? Surely to maximise the prospects of success for a border poll is not only to gather up the core supporters of United Ireland, but to gather up the constituency who will come to define the border poll prospect as an opportunity to vote again on Brexit.
Dr. Miller?
So from your question, I think it's a great point, and I think what we actually need to learn from, and I'm just going to skirt around that point just for 1 second, is the mistakes that have happened both in the Scottish and the sort of Brexit campaigns. I think we need to have a much stronger officiating body first that basically is able to control what's coming out of politicians' mouths. Okay, and I think that when you find politicians have straight up lied, blurred the truth, they should be sacked, fired, jailed. Okay, I think it's basically almost tantamount to treason when they do that. And I think that we have to be, before we go down the border poll referendum, we need to be getting to that stage of being able to officiate our officials. I think in terms of having a second border poll, or a border poll as another referendum on Brexit, I completely agree with you. I think it probably would be, okay, for the middle ground in Northern Ireland, and I've got nothing against that. I think people voted in their drones for it, okay, and as such they should be allowed to have a vote on it again. And this is one of the reasons why I put down against the proposition that you talk about effectively this House wants a United Ireland, not this House wants a United Ireland post-Brexit. And all the arguments you heard from them were this House wants a United Ireland, okay, not this House wants a United Ireland post-Brexit. And as such, you have to talk about whether or not Brexit is going to be a success. And if it is a failure, then great, the Northern Irish people actually have a second chance to re-enter the EU. Okay, and it's not like going to be like the Scottish referendum where they wouldn't be, and they would effectively be voting for complete freedom from everybody. Okay, they would be effectively voting to join the Republic and therefore rejoin the EU. I completely agree with you there. So let's wait until we know if the Brexit plans are going to be a success, then put it to the people. That's voting around something.
Proposition.
Right, just then.
By all means.
But I don't see how that's. I don't see how that. You got 2 minutes extra. I don't see how that's. I could easily concede that because I don't think any of us realistically think we're going to be voting in a border poll next week or in a year. Probably. I think that's unlikely. Maybe in the next 5 years. But I'm post Brexit. To me, I mean, I'm personally willing to see. Let's wait 5 years and see how this comes out. I see. To me, that seems like still a post Brexit United Ireland. Nevertheless, I'm not sure how that's.
All right. Well, I'm aware we're running really quite short on time, so I'll allow one more question to. This one can be to either side. And then we'll move on to a vote and our closing remarks. So I'll take one last question. Will the lucky person be yourself? If you'd just like to state your name for the record.
Yeah, it's Timothy. So I'm going to direct this towards the proposition more. It'll apply to you a bit more. I don't know any of the proposition, never met any before, but it's quite clear that you have 4 different ideas. It was coming across that the economics are a bit ropey. and how some people are saying the money's there, some people are saying the money's not there. It's either there or it's not. But really, during the Brexit campaign, we had a lot of people, and people who were on the sort of United Ireland side, both in society and in Stormont, who were saying, you know, there's a lot of uncertainty around Brexit, so is it really sensible, regardless, before we've even left the EU or even triggered Article 50, to even be remotely considering 4 different opinions? We're going to have to try and collude all this into one sort of idea of a United Ireland before we even have to vote. That's pretty risky, given that there's already been uncertainty in a lot of amounts over the last lot of months.
It's Hogan, right?
A couple of different things here, just picking up on that point. So yeah, you're right, it's Broadchurch here. We've definitely heard 2 radically different versions of United Ireland. That's okay. For us, the motion that we're putting forward is that we support Post Brexit United Ireland. Maybe a better way to put it would be we support a Post Brexit United Ireland more than we support a Post Brexit Northern Ireland within the UK. I think we're trying to emphasise the amount of flexibility, the amount of freedom that we really do have here to make this what we will. On the point of certainty versus uncertainty, would you not concede that, and it's been made as a point from the opposition here, that there is quite a level of uncertainty with how Brexit's going to go? It's coming from a Brexiteer. I know that that's true. We don't know how Brexit's going to play out. We might need to wait 5 or 10 years to see how it will go. Okay, fair enough. Concession. But for me it seems that while there is almost no certainties with staying in the UK in the long term, talk about a few electoral cycles, there is at least one gold certainty with a United Ireland that will always be there, and it's that whoever you vote for, you will get. The party that you vote for will be, well, not the party necessarily that you vote for will be the one that ends up in power, but you can be damn sure that the party that the majority of the country votes for will be the one in power. Surely, is that not worth its weight in gold when it comes to a constitutional arrangement like this?
And opposition, would you like to make a final response, Mr. Videri?
Well, I'm really happy to hear that at least our arguments have been accepted by 4 people in the room. During any of the speeches was this idea of border poll after the effects of Brexit as a whole on Northern Ireland being considered was brought up. Instead, it was almost as if we were going to be marching in Stormont with no eat. No, what we say empirically that the economics behind the situation are not as clearly thought through. But even beyond that, because I do agree that the uncertainty of the times may lead to wonky economic predictions. I mean, we can project 30 years in advance due to GDP estimates and export quotas and the existence of contracts. I brought up in my speech, but at its core, what we are leaping into is not economic. It's not the economic instability that concerns me the most. And I'm not wielding this as a weapon of fear that seemed to be employed so much during the campaign, but I worry that the fragile power sharing arrangement, which we have worked out and it has been voted on in turnouts above 80%, I need to remind the entire House about that we stood together and rejected the violence. So why are we leaping back into asking Northern Irish people to ask that question again? We are lighting the tinderbox. That's it.
I'm afraid you've already had your opportunity to respond. With that, we will move on to our vote for the evening. Just to Whitehurst and I now have the privilege of counting all the hands in the room. So we're going to do 3 votes because one vote's not enough, and you take your inspiration from Scotland in that way. Yes.
Before we proceed, it strikes me as being odd that that last question was directed to the proposition leading to an imbalance in the questions. May I be permitted to ask one final question to the audience?
I said for the sake of time, because we're really quite pushing along, I said I would offer one last question in general, and it could be offered to either side. So I think we've ended the questions proceeding on that basis.
Quick response.
Yeah, but then if I give you a response, then I have to give them a response, and then everybody wants a response. All right, kids, settle down.
Okay, in terms of the power sharing agreement in Northern Ireland, the problems with Northern Ireland and what led to the trouble essentially was that one side believed that democracy was on their side, and the other side believed that the Northern Irish state was formed as a process of gerrymandering and all the rest. You can't change that. You can't change how Northern Ireland is formed. You can't change the democratic, what side thinks the democratic decisions on their side. If and whenever, well, it's a matter of when, not if, in my opinion, that tide turns to 51% in favour of United Ireland, there will be no trouble. There will be the trouble will be minimal. And if you think that loyalist violence is going to flare up again, or the violence that we saw in the past is going to happen, then you've got a lower opinion of loyalism than I do, because the Democrats will not be on their side, and they will understand that. So for that reason, I think if it does fall over onto the side of 51% side, I don't foresee the violence that you foresee in the future. Thank you.
Any more response from the opposition? Like, maybe you can go for very, very quick.
Should we just go to a vote?
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to come up to the front so it's a bit easier to cut the hands from this raised platform?
One more.
Yes, Mr. Adair, what do you want?
Sorry to keep this up, but can we suspend membership requirements for voting considering turnout?
It makes my job easier, so yeah. So we're going to do three, third vote isn't going to happen anymore time. Two votes that we're going to be doing this evening. First vote is of your prior opinion, so what was your sustainable legal belief before you came into the room tonight? The second vote will be based on speaker ability, so who you thought the case more effectively this evening. Just so we have a sort of an idea of how the debate swayed your opinion. So we'll start off with the prior opinion vote. If you were in favour of the motion before entering the room this evening, please raise your hand and say aye. If you were in favour of a Post Brexit United Ireland, please raise your hand and say aye. And if you were against the motion before you entered the room this evening, please raise your hand and say nay. And if you didn't really have an opinion beforehand, sort of abstained on it, sort of raise your hands half-heartedly and say nah. And now moving on to the votes of speaker ability. So we'll start off with the proposition. If you thought the proposition argued their case the most strongly, that's just the butchery of the English language. The best. The best. Yeah. So if you thought the proposition's case was the strongest this evening, please raise your hands and say aye.
The proposition being these chaps on your...
And if you thought that the opposition argued their case more effectively, please raise your hands and say nay, I guess.
Nay.
You're going to have to recount again. Keep your hands high, sorry. I got 30. And if you thought that both sides spoke equally well, or equally rubbish, or just equally as good as each other, just put your hands up and say, yay, go team. So, on prior opinion, the vote was 37 in favour of the motion, 26 against. After this, the debate, proposition had 44 votes. I just read them the totally wrong way around. Sorry, prior opinion. It's been a long day, Ayes 37 beforehand, and nays 28. Close to the debate, 44 for the proposition and 32 for the opposition. So the motion is carried. This House does believe in Brexit now. We'll move on to our closing statements by Dr. Stephen Carr. So I would like to support 2 weeks.
First of all, pass on my congratulations to the speakers on both sides of the debate, which was fought, I have to say, with very good humour and dignity, more so than we are used to in the Assembly for the official record, so there you go. Standards are improving in that regard, which is deeply encouraging. The debate itself, of course, is highly topical, but I think the first thing to do is to try to deconstruct actually the motion before the House. In the sense, it actually conflates two particular debates. One is that between United Ireland and the retention of Northern Ireland as part of the UK. The second issue is whether Brexit is itself good or bad. And obviously we have people on both sides of the arguments on United Ireland and the UK who may have different perspectives on Brexit itself. So there's never a neat alignment on these particular issues. It is worth stressing, of course, that we can think of this in terms of a third potential option, which is probably one where a lot of the attention is currently focusing, which is whether Northern Ireland should have some sort of special status or some form of special arrangement with the European Union, which may or may not be something that could be contingent upon continued membership of the United Kingdom or potentially a United Ireland, though in the context of United Ireland that distinction probably does tend to disappear to a certain extent. Also, whenever we look at some of the particular issues that were before us as well, first of all, whenever we talk about money, it's useful maybe to think separately in terms of finance and economics. Well, in terms of finance, you can argue very clearly that there is a very large subvention that comes from the UK Treasury to Northern Ireland that could not be matched at this particular moment in time by the Irish government. That is balanced in terms of argument, if not in terms of value of money, by the potential loss of European funding, because Northern Ireland does do a lot better under European funding than we would in terms of any money coming back to the UK Treasury and then being redistributed back to the regions, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland and other parts of England. I suppose agriculture is probably the example in that regard, where at present we receive 10% full CAP payments coming into the UK based upon 3% of the population. And if we were to get our barley consequential share, we're talking potentially a two-thirds drop in terms of farm incomes, which would be a fairly major challenge in that regard. In terms of economics, again, the case is mixed, and It depends in terms of where you see the choices being made of what is actually a particular business model that you're talking about at a particular point in time. Brexit overall is going to mean a lot of choices being made by people around issues around borders, where borders are drawn on maps, where people can have and where they can't have relationships, and indeed where they can do business free of restriction and where they have more barriers in place. I would say, which is an interesting point that no one actually brought up in the debate in itself, which was the notion of whether Ireland itself should actually Brexit and join in a different relationship with the UK outside of the European Union. That's not my personal point of view, I should stress, but it is something that I thought that may have come up in the debate. I would suggest that perhaps if the UK had left the European Union in 1975 referendum, it would be very likely at that stage that the Irish Republic would have no choice but to leave the European Union as well, because its economy was so tied to the market in Great Britain at the time. Today the choice is much more nuanced, and it again depends upon the sector. If you're talking about a lot of the big inward investment companies coming in based upon the lower corporate tax and their skills base, the European market is by far more important. But if you look at some of the more traditional sectors in Ireland, particularly around agriculture, the GB market is of particular consequence. So the notion of a tariff wall between Ireland and the UK is something that the Irish agriculture sector would feel very, very strongly. At the same time, we also have to recognise that it's fine talking about political integration on the island. We also have to look at the level of economic integration. But again, some sectors will be more integrated than others. For some sectors, the setting into Great Britain is more important. For others, setting into Europe is more important. And indeed, we have a lot of supply chains that are organised on an all-island basis. Particularly whenever you look at agri-foods, basically it has become effectively integrated over the past 30 years. Put it very crudely, we do pigs, they do cows in terms of processing, and a potential tariff wall there is going to create huge difficulties in terms of how that particular sector will continue. In terms of the politics and constitution, I mean, Brexit is something that is going to cause huge complexities over the years to come. And I would suggest that if we hadn't had the current collapse of institutions around renewable heat incentives, etc., that Brexit itself may well have brought the executive to this current situation because of the almost irreconcilable positions that are taken by parties on different sides of the argument. So it is a huge challenge for Northern Ireland politically, because it does mean making choices about where borders are drawn or where they're not drawn, and there will be political consequences that flow from that particular issue. So it is something that we'll be exercising this over the months to come. Just a couple of maybe small asides in terms of things with the Conservative Party. There are a lot of mentions on the positive side, derogatory comment as well. Just for the start of the record, it is worth noting that the Conservative Party have actually received the lowest ever share of the vote by mainstream political party in UK history in Northern Ireland. At the same time, they also have received the highest ever share of the vote for a UK political party in British parliamentary history, also in a Northern Ireland constituency. So you can look those up at some stage as an issue of curiosity. What's now going to happen is, with Article 50 being triggered, we will see how this debate will play out. There's no common negotiating position from Northern Ireland. The UK government is seeking to negotiate on behalf of Northern Ireland. That is perhaps being challenged by a number of political parties. The Irish government are very keen to represent the interests of Northern Ireland as well, and there are voices in the European Union, right from Angela Merkel downwards, who have expressed at different times an understanding of the particular complexities this throws up for this part of the world. So this is going to be very much a live debate over the months to come, and set to very much dominate our politics over the years ahead, including once we get through the current political crisis. So your choice of debate tonight is extremely timely, and I congratulate you on your choice and indeed the manner in which you've conducted the debate. Thank you very much.
And with that really concludes everything for this evening. I think just before we go, I'd just like to thank Dr. Farry again for coming along. The run up to a snap election, which must be very hectic, so thank you very much for taking the time out to come along and chair this debate. And I'll offer another round of applause. So I should say, if any of you have been here before, enjoyed the competitive arguing you've seen this evening, like you enjoy yelling at people as we do, by all means sign up. We have a lovely selection of really shiny term cards, implying that your magpies are coming. Yeah, we have lovely term cards there, so if you'd be interested in signing up and come along to more debates, we also have term cards there to take along with you if you'd like to see what other debates we'll be having this semester. Equally as enticing. So yeah, by all means sign up, and with that we're going to adjourn. I think some of us are going to adjourn to our usual haunt in the house bar. So thank you very much for coming along this evening.